I'm JennaMiscavige. I was born and raised in Scientology. I left when I was 21 years old and wrote a book about it. My uncle, DavidMiscavige, is the leader of Scientology, and this is my YouTube channel. Hi guys, I'm here today with my beautiful, hot friend, Natalie. I know most of you guys already know her, but just in case you don't, she grew up in Scientology as well, and she has a channel called Life After a Cult. Hi, Natalie.
Hey, Jenna, I'm so excited. It's been so long since we've done a video.
I know it has been. And I asked Natalie to do this video with me because I wanted to have a conversation rather than just talking to the camera on my own, but she doesn't even know what we're going to talk about. So I've essentially booby trapped her.
You
So
tricked me. I'm captive. I'm blinking
exactly.
twice because I need help.
So whatever I say, it's not Natalie's fault.
It's not my fault.
Okay, so this is actually on the subject of therapy, though. Have you had therapy since you left Scientology?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm a big fan.
Okay, good. Me too. And I've had mixed results. Like some has been really good when I really needed it, and then other times it's like I want to play this clip because it sort of says my feelings better than I possibly can. And I just thought it would be an interesting subject matter because both things are true. It can be really, really helpful. And then maybe there can be a time where it's like, maybe you need to not dwell in the past, or maybe that becomes destructive. Okay, I'm going to try to share this screen. Here we go.
With this is when you sit and you talk about your problems all the time, when you dwell on them, when you analyze them, when you sit there and you've had something bad happen to you and you are trying to dissect that thing to the nth degree to figure out why it happened, what you're doing is you're feeding your brain, and even spiritually, right? If we bring it to that level, only negative things. You are dwelling and retelling and reliving the harm that's caused to you. And one of the predominant places that happens is in the therapy room. Because most people, when they go to therapy, what do? You talk about everything that's wrong in your life. So you have to take a moment, because I've had people come to me, I need help with this. And when I speak to them, they'll be in years of therapy. And I'll ask them, what do you go for? What do you do when you're in there?
Right.
I talk about my problems. So if I sit and I always talk about my problems and I relive them and I retell them, and then I get emotionally upset, what kind of headspace am I in?
I'm just going to pause really fast because I realized I didn't say that this is Evie Pomporas, and she's was a Secret Service agent for 13 years, and she's talking to Lewis Howes on his YouTube channel, and as you can see, it's called The School of Greatness.
Wow.
And she wrote a book. Okay, I'm just going to play the rest of it now.
The Hippocratic Oath, I'm Greek, it's do no harm. So I think going to therapy and getting help is a great thing. So long as you understand, why am I going? What's my purpose? And so long as you have a good doctor that says, we're done now.
Mm-hmm.
You don't need me anymore.
Yes.
I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think it's such an individual need.
Mm-hmm.
And we have such different individual needs that what works for one person doesn't work for the other. And I have found personally that the type of therapy makes a huge difference. I'm a big fan of cognitive behavioral therapy, which has to do with a lot of reframing and really gives you a lot of tools.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the biggest things I like about it is it's like at a certain point, it's like, okay, you're good to go now. You use these tools moving forward.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very close to somebody who is a CBT therapist.
Mm-hmm.
And she said it's part of what she loves is because in about 6, 7, 8 weeks, on average, it's like, okay, now, go forth and prosper.
Yes, I like that aspect of it a lot too, because it gives you a chance to develop a skill and then actually work the muscle to use it. And then of course, if you need a refresher or if you forget how to do it or whatever, you can always go back. But what wound up happening with me is that I would start therapy because I really needed it at the moment. Something bad was going on. And then it would go on, and it became this thing that was like every week where it was like, okay, well, what happened this week? And then it was like this set appointment. And then I would sort of go back and sort of like complain about everything and
Mhm.
be like, this happened, and then this happened, and then relive it and like get all pissed off about it. And then it would be like, time's up. And I'd be like, why did I just do that? Like, it just like, I don't know, like I didn't get anything from that after a while. At first, I needed it, but then it just became like a complaining session, and there wasn't any cognitive behavioral therapy. There wasn't any lesson. There wasn't anything to move forward with. Occasionally, it would be like, okay, well, maybe look at this, but it wasn't like productive. And so it
Mhm.
almost felt like it was an endless thing where I would like focus on all the negative and I would expect it to help me. And then it would just be like, it would almost make me feel worse because then I would be doing that and then I would just get cut off. Did that ever happen to you?
Well, I have been fortunate in that the only therapy I've done have been along the lines of cognitive behavioral therapy.
Mm,
I watched a lot of I kinda, like, have watched different things on YouTube to see different styles as well, and I'm a tool person, and I feel like you're that way too.
yes.
We do
Yes.
well with give us the tools to do something, and we will do it,
Yeah.
and that's what I found to be helpful is for me, it was empowering.
Mhm.
And it was more about, okay, you've got these tools now, go live your life. And if you hit a bump in the road, hit me up. Like it's just
Yes.
that simple in a way. And for me personally, that's what worked. I'm
Mm,
very similar to you. I wouldn't do well if it was just rehashing and rehashing. Like I need solutions. I need to understand. And I also believe that when you have breakthroughs, this is my opinion, I am not a therapist,
mhm.
but when you have breakthroughs in therapy, I find sometimes like I need to take the time in my life to process and to live with
Yes.
it and be with it without talking about it.
I agree. Yes. That's how I feel too.
Well, I think a good therapist, I think a good, ones that I've worked with in this cognitive behavioral therapy were like that. And
Mhm.
my situation, and again, we're all very different. There are people who need more intense therapy
Of
because of
course.
maybe mental health issues. When in talking about the situations I would find myself in, what I
Mhm.
needed help with, it was often more like situational, and I need a refresh of those tools, or
Right.
somebody else I need help seeing it from a different point of view, and that's where I found value in it. But
Mhm.
for me, a lot of the value was then being set loose to go live
Yes.
life.
Exactly, yes, to let it sink in, because I remember when I first started with my last the one before last therapist, she did notice something in my behavior that was really helpful to me, which was when I would have certain emotions, I would be like, "It's because I'm crazy. It's because there's something wrong with me." She'd be like, "No, you're not. That's no. You're having them for a reason." And that really was helpful. But then it just went on too long. And I never did anything like cognitive behavioral therapy. Natalie's actually the one who told me about that. And then I took the credit for learning about it in my videos. But you told me about therapy in a nutshell. And I just really like using that as a tool. But I'm going to play a little bit more of this because, he talks about how therapy was helpful to him. And I think that, like me and Natalie say, we're only talking about ourselves.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, each situation is unique. Each of us as individuals are unique. And again, we are not therapists. We're just sharing our experience as especially as people who were formerly in a cult.
exactly. Okay, hold on. Let me show this.
Because growing up as a man in, I guess, the Western culture, I was never acceptable to express feelings, right? So it's kind of like an extreme of just don't acknowledge it, don't talk about it, don't express it, don't let it out. Let it out through anger or sports or some other strategy to kind of let out your emotions. And by suppressing it for so long and not just talking about it at least a few times, it made me feel like a lot of pressure. It made me feel like something was boiling inside of me. And as I started talking about the things that were causing me emotional pain or frustration, and figuring out how to integrate the lessons of healing or release and move beyond it, I started to feel better. But if I was constantly reliving a story and feeling emotionally heightened by it, I could assume that wouldn't benefit me long term. But on the flip side, like not talking about it at all might cause me stress or chronic, stress or pain or something else.
That's so interesting, because especially given our background,
Mm-hmm.
not talking about things was pretty much the only thing that we could do. And then by not addressing it, I can speak from my own experience, all those years of just pushing down feelings and trauma and not dealing with it so I could keep working and being productive for Scientology. Then it comes out sideways, with autoimmune disease and other
Right.
finds a way of coming out. And
Mm-hmm.
it's finding that, what works where we're not avoiding it, because emotions can be unpleasant. But we have to, there's some that we need to experience in order to process it. But that's why I
Right.
think the therapy makes such a difference, right? How you process it and how you move forward with it. But I could see how just rehashing it over and over and over again, I wouldn't do well in that environment either.
Yeah, totally. What I was thinking when he was saying this, I was like, so all men, you need to go to therapy. That's a
think
joke.
we
I
all-
know, but he was like, well, because men are like raised to push down their feelings. But then when you said that, it was like, we were kind of raised like how men are in
Yes.
Scientology, where, we were taught to push down our feelings all the time.
Mhm.
So we sort of have that similarity to what
Yeah.
he's talking about.
That's very true. I myself was very distracted, but for other reasons. That is a handsome man. Look, I'm gonna need a link to that video.
Automatically, I'm like, he's too old for me, but I'm like, no, he's not. I'm old now too.
Probably
I'll
too
send
young
you
for me, but a girl can dream.
So I think it's a balance
It's the
of like
balance.
learning how to communicate it and learning how to release it, but getting a strategy to go beyond it.
Yes, you want to be in a state of moving forward. But
Yeah.
if I retell it and retell it and retell it and retell it and relive it, it's like eating McDonald's. No offense to McDonald's.
Yes.
But if I eat McDonald's every day, I'm putting junk in my body's going to show. If I'm retelling every bad event and I'm feeding that to my mind and into my soul on a consistent basis,
Yes.
I'm not going to feel good either. So you control the thoughts that come into your mind. And if you sit, and sometimes, Louis, bad things just happen. And sometimes there is no why did it happen. It happened. And sometimes there's no analyzing it and assessing it to figure out what.
Yeah.
And I say this, I went through September 11th. I was in the World Trade Center. I survived.
You were there during it?
I was
Wow.
there. I had colleagues who died, friends who died. I was almost killed. If I sat and I retold that story and relived it, I would be a mess. How am I ever going to move past it?
Right.
So one thing I thought that was really interesting when she was talking about reliving it, it's sort of a little bit sort of what we do on YouTube,
Yeah.
which is kind of interesting because we have seen people in our community like have it become too much for them. Sometimes, you and I have talked that it's a bit much for you, and honestly, it's a bit much for me too. And I just thought that was really interesting because to me, it really highlighted the importance of sort of having a variety or of doing fun things in between, or, going between talking about telling your own story, but also maybe telling someone else's, or maybe just, I don't know, just like telling about your current life or talking about healing. What do you think?
I agree with you completely. I mean, on my channel, it's like a daily recap of Scientology and culty news. Not with so much a focus on my own story. I share things from my story at times. I do videos specifically with my story. But if I had to only talk about my experience, yeah, I would not be able to do that on YouTube day after day. And it's a large part why on my channel, I try to bring a lot of humor, because for me, that makes it tolerable to go back to this space, to go back to sometimes a state of mind, because to remember things, even when I'm doing doing shows on my YouTube channel, I have to think like, okay, how would I have thought about that when I was a Scientologist or when I was in the Sea organization?
Mm-hmm.
And, that's not always a pleasant headspace to be in, but I have
Yeah.
found that the more tools that I got through the type of therapy I did, and I mean, my gosh, reading books, so many things, I had a variety of tools to use. And that helped me, like, okay, sometimes I just need to go for a walk, or,
Mm-hmm.
go have a good cry in the shower, or
Yes.
whatever
Yeah.
it is, but not getting too stuck in. Yeah, I don't sit there and dwell on it. And I don't think in my situation, even though I'll bring something up and I'll think that I can talk about it without crying, and then just the tears will come.
Mm-hmm.
That's a normal reaction to a lot of what happened. And
Yes, of
with
course.
with some of it, I don't know that we'll ever get to the point where it doesn't emotionally affect us, but I don't know that it not affecting us emotionally is even the place where we want to be either, because for me, that's what lights a fire within me, of remembering how hard it was for me in Scientology in trying to leave. That motivates me to want to do more videos about it, do more content, interview more former members, interview experts, just find ways of bringing some solutions to people so they know they're not alone. Because as you know, many people like us, when they leave Scientology, therapy is not the first stop, because
Mm.
of how L. Ron Hubbard was completely against psychiatry.
Right. Yes. Yeah. It's so true. There was something you were saying when you were talking about going on a walk and taking like a shower and crying. And I thought that it reminded me of when I was talking to Tim Fletcher, who's a childhood trauma expert, about how he talks about building up your toolkit.
Mhm.
And I think if therapy helps you do that, your toolkit of how to soothe yourself, how to go through these things, because like you said, it's not necessarily going to go away.
Yeah.
It's something that you learn to cope with in a healthy way by soothing yourself. And so by getting those tools, I think that that is such an important part of therapy, or part of your own life path, reading books, learning new things. And that's so much more than just rehashing over and over again. Rehashing is one thing in your toolkit. And so just building that up. So when that time comes, when it's overwhelming you, you have all of these ways to soothe yourself, to get through it,
Yeah.
etc. That's just so important. And that's one of the things also I really liked about Tim, is that they have courses on how to deal with this stuff, where it's something where it makes me feel like my healing is in my hands and I don't have to wait for the universe to come together in a certain way. I feel like I am at cause.
Yeah.
That's like a Scientology like kind of phrasing, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, totally. It gives us, when we have tools, a toolbox with multiple things in there, it just makes life easier. It's with anything. It's that whole teach a man to fish story, right? If you give a man fish, he eats for a day. Teach him to fish, and he can eat for a lifetime. And I feel that with the type of therapy I've done, what I find helpful, and therapy in a nutshell, that YouTube channel you mentioned, I've
Mhm.
learned so much there as well. And I feel like that's like, now I can go fish, and it gets
Mhm.
me more fired up to want to go fish, to want to go and do that. And it
Mhm.
also helps me feel confident that if I'm in a place, if I'm talking about whether it's my own story or I'm sharing someone else's and it's just very triggering, that I still have the tools to get myself
Mhm.
out of it. And if I'm not getting, for me, I have a whole toolbox. Like if I'm not getting myself out of it, I have like where I can phone a friend.
Mhm. I found Natalie.
Yeah. And I phone you.
Oh my God, I'm probably sitting here talking about how rehashing isn't such a big deal. And you're probably like, you little liar, Jenna. I'm the victim of your rehashing. You're like, that's why you don't need a therapist anymore. Poor Natalie.
But that's what helps. That's the thing that was missing for us growing up in Scientology. We weren't allowed to talk about it to each other. I could have
Right.
never have gone to you and been like, "Man, Jenna, I'm like really upset that they're trying to get me to end my pregnancy when I don't want to." No
Mhm.
one's saying that.
Right. Yeah,
Very
totally.
isolating. You're very alone. That's how they keep you in a cult. Is not making those connections. And that we can do that today. I mean, I really think that that's what friends are for. That's why we have relationships, is so we can help each other that way. And then when there's times where we need more tools, where it's outside the realm of, just even talking to a friend, it's good to have, like, I know where to go. Like, if I wanted to get more therapy, I know where to go for that.
Mhm.
Like it's always there as a tool.
Yes, totally. That makes sense.
Even then, so I guess I understood that and I learned that I must let go. And I'll never go to who Evie was before, but I don't want to go to who she was
She's talking about her September 11th experience just before she was saying this.
Mm.
before. I want to take what I experienced and bring that experience into my life. And now I appreciate my life. And I'll tell you this, Lewis, if I'm ready to go now. Tomorrow, something happens. Tonight, something happens. I'm okay.
Wow.
Because I've lived my life the best I could, and I've done the things that I could. I tried to find and make meaning in my life. I'm okay.
Right. I'm hearing an ambulance go outside as this is happening. This is pretty intense. One of the things that I can really appreciate how you say reliving past painful events and speaking about them and causing yourself more heightened emotions and stress doesn't really serve you past a certain point.
Yes.
Previously, when I was having anxiety and I was going to a different therapist, I mean, I still have anxiety. I don't know who doesn't, to be honest.
Yeah,
But
It
um,
comes with the packaging.
exactly, yeah. But she was saying that like when you catastrophize, you are sort of like imagining the most terrible thing happening, and it's almost the same as actually going through it. Like your body views it in the same way.
Exactly.
And yeah, and so on some level, reliving these painful experiences or rehashing, like, so for me, it came to a point where like rehashing every fight I had with my husband or every little off conversation I had with my therapist was almost like having it again.
I know that when I talk about something a
Mhm.
few times, it gets easier to talk about. And I think it's important to make the differentiation between there's, situational depression, but then there's like chronic depression.
Mhm.
There's, like in my situation, the loss of Tony, that's like a situational huge thing.
Right. Mhm.
And so I can relate to that to the degree that I know the more I talk about it, the easier it gets for me.
Mhm.
But I could see that if I just was running it through my head over and over again, I would never get up off the floor. I know that.
Mm. Mm.
And I was shocked actually in ways that I have lots of moments on the floor, but
Mhm.
because fortunately I've accumulated some tools, I try to use them. And it's
Mhm.
what gets me through and makes it so that I can continue to keep showing up.
Mm.
And it's interesting that way. I don't know when but I can remember when I was younger, I would
Mhm.
just think about it, ruminate, and then get myself all stirred up.
That's what I do, and so that's maybe why I shouldn't do it, because I already am in the habit of dwelling too much.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the key is, in my opinion, as a non-therapist,
Mhm.
is recognizing being able to pull ourselves out of it. So like if I'm experiencing grief, like I'm like, okay, I'm going to go through some of Tony's stuff. I'm going to have a good cry. I'm going to do the things, and I
Mhm.
do, and I cry and I get it out. If I'm not able to get myself back to functioning, then I
Mhm.
kind of have some tools there, right? First one might be a phone call. Maybe I need to go for a walk. Maybe I need to, but
Mhm.
I had made a personal decision early on before he even died that I would
Mhm.
never let it get past a certain point. That
Mm,
if I
wow.
felt I could not, and honestly, I mean, it's been 9 months now since he died, and
Mhm.
medication helped.
Mm.
Anti-anxiety meds
Yeah,
helped for those moments where I could not pull myself out of it. I could not function.
right. Yeah,
And yeah, and that helped. And there it just got further and further between how me needing to take it. And I don't even know how long it's been now. And I still have my moments of grief,
of course.
but I'm able to pull myself out of it and then show up for my life. I think when we're going through something difficult and it prevents us from even functioning,
Mhm.
then that's a great example of when too, I think like some therapy, if you don't have those tools, would absolutely help. For me, it was like an online like widows group that help
Mm.
me process and learning. We never learned grief growing up in Scientology. We never learned how to process
Totally.
loss.
Yeah.
No.
No, not at all. Because if you complained about things in Scientology, you were taught that you were only thinking those thoughts because you had done something bad that you were trying to hide. But you going like you having your partner die is a huge life event that
Yeah,
of course you're going to need therapy and
yeah,
help for, and of course it's going to take a long time,
yeah.
or or it's going to be an off and on process, and
Mhm.
you're like honestly like one of the strongest people who I know.
Oh, I appreciate that.
You really are, yeah. But like that's like so me just like having an appointment where it's like, yeah, my husband was a dick today. He didn't do the dishes. It's like, do I really? That's like it almost is like it almost is teaching me to find all these little things to nitpick about.
Yeah.
And like for instance, like I guess they talk about it a little bit now, but it's almost like I'm looking for the negative. And then imagine if my partner had passed away and then I had just spent all this time looking at the negative when I could have been looking at the positive, you
Yeah.
know? So it's like I think that therapy is so important, but I actually think that it's good that we're honest about some of the pitfalls of it, because
Mhm.
nothing is a perfect solution. And any really good solution can turn into something that is not good. So just because you are getting therapy does not mean that you are doing everything right, that you are more, I don't know, like emotionally advanced than other people. There are good things about it and there are sometimes bad things about it. And I think it's good to like just be honest about it, you know?
Yeah, when we're going through, and I think we all know when we're making progress or we're not making progress. And I've come to learn progress is not just, oh, I'm just slowly moving forward. Sometimes it's, I feel like, wow, I took 3 giant steps forward. And then the next day I take 4 back. Then I
Yeah.
take 2 forward and 1 back, but I'm still working my way forward. And it's such a personal decision on what tools you use. But I
Mhm.
know for me, my kind of yardstick with all of it has been, is it helping me show up in the way I want to show up to do the
Mm.
things that I want to do?
Yes.
And then if it's not, and
Mm.
that's not just therapy, that's anything for me. If I'm,
That's true.
using a certain tool or whatever, and it's not contributing to me showing up the way I want, then, I want to make a change. It's not something that I want to use. And I think that for different people too. And again, there's so many different therapy styles. And
Mhm.
I'm seeing more and more people I know trying to go more like the cognitive behavioral therapy route, because it involves a lot of reframing, being able to kind of take a step back, but it's a tool you can use. You don't have to wait till you're in therapy. When
Right.
you learn these tools, you can also at any time be like, okay, I'm going to take a step back and I'm going to try and identify what my feelings are and my thoughts versus, actual reality, because sometimes we don't perceive reality as it is. We perceive it as we are, where
Right.
we're coming from.
Right.
That's
Mhm.
going to have 5 people see an accident and get 5 different reports about what happened. It doesn't mean that they're trying to lie. They're just seeing it differently. And I think coming to that understanding helped me so much, because it made it easier for me to trust people, because I started realizing that, I've hurt people at times and that wasn't my intention.
Mhm.
People that I love.
Mhm.
So why am I assuming that someone I love is intentionally trying to hurt me? It was like that was a breakthrough moment. And it was that
Mhm.
cognitive behavioral therapy that helped me understand that,
Mm.
along with, the definition of trust that I've adopted, that
Mm.
I don't remember if I read it or saw it in a video, but that it's trust is you're operating on the assumption that the person is not going to intentionally hurt you. And
Right.
that's a game changer. And I feel where we come from, our background in Scientology,
Mhm.
we have huge trust issues.
Mhm.
Even though I can get there on a personal level initially, although I don't know, in ways for me, not trusting people was an improvement because I was
Right.
too trustful.
Yeah, yeah.
And I didn't have boundaries, and
Yeah.
not having boundaries is what would get me in trouble.
Right. Mhm.
Because we cannot control the other people and what they do, but
Mhm.
I could learn like, "Oh, okay, I'm not really vibing with that person, so I'm gonna have a bigger boundary where I'm not exposing myself as
Right.
much to their energy," right?
Right, but in kind of what you're saying, like, the sort of theme through it that I'm seeing is that, well, like, growing up as children, our parents are supposed to teach us. At first, they help us regulate our emotions. They co-regulate by holding us like a baby, and we hear their heartbeat, and they tell us that it's all okay, and then we're supposed to learn from that how to regulate our emotions and how to have our own toolkit. But if you only rely on therapy as like, "Oh, this is the person I need to run to when this bad thing is happening," you aren't learning how to take care of yourself. You're setting yourself up in a situation where you're reliant on somebody else. And we're all reliant on other people to some degree.
Mhm.
We're all reliant on our friends and our spouse or our significant other or whatever. But I think that you can't, like, your therapist isn't always available when you're in a fight or when whatever. So any therapy that can give you tools for so that you can deal with this on your own, or so you can learn to deal with it with people in your life,
Yes. Yeah.
and maybe even start out with that as a goal. To me, that would be so much that would have been so much more helpful, and I wish I had known that that was an option. I mean, I was in therapy for a year, and there was no mention of cognitive behavioral therapy or a single tool, to be honest.
Mhm. Yeah, that would
So
be a good, like, a not a no-go, a not a good fit, because there's also
yeah,
situations where people
but
went
you
through.
don't know it's not a good fit because
Yeah,
I'm not a therapist. Yeah, so they should, like, I don't know, they should have some sort of responsibility, like, I don't know, to tell you what types of therapy there are or what options there are, because it's sort of like people say find someone who's a good fit, and it's like, well, I don't really know what's out there since I'm not an expert in therapy, which is why I'm literally paying you out of my ass a
yeah.
lot of money to talk to me. Please, you tell me what I need.
Yeah, give me some tools, help a girl out.
Exactly.
And
Mm.
I'll never go to who Evie was before, but I don't want to go to who she was before. I want to take what I experienced and bring that experience into my life. And now I appreciate my life. And I'll tell you this, Lewis, if I'm ready to go now. Tomorrow, something happens. Tonight, something happens. I'm okay
Wow.
because I've lived my life the best I could, and I've done the things that I could. I tried to find and make meaning in my life.
Mhm.
I'm okay.
Oh, yes. Now you're going to be my therapist. I wish I had more time to prepare these clips because today I had to go to the car dealership because my like navigation thing wasn't working.
Uh-huh.
And I was so angry that I had to go because my car is like relatively new.
Yes.
And
Uh,
I only got this car because my previous car was totally paid off. I could have gotten it fixed, but I was like, I don't want to keep going to the repair shop to get this fixed because I don't have time. Like it's like fixing plumbing. It's like, I don't want to spend my life fixing my car. And so I'm so mad that this thing doesn't work and that I have to pay like literally like $800 a month to have this car and that I still have to go get it fixed. And then I dropped my breakfast on the floor when I was there. So then I had to eat a donut when I was there. So it's messed up my diet. Takes my time. It's messing up my video. I'm so angry.
But it's interesting though, because if you think about it, right? Like if you go back and you're like to the beginning of your day, like what could you have done for yourself where you could have slowed it down? You know, we pile on ourselves and we pile and especially us, we have a tendency to just keep going, keep going, keep going.
Yeah.
And what I've been learning to trust more is if it feels a little clunky, sometimes I just need to stop and go, okay. And it might take me 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 20 minutes to just kind of get present again and go, okay, what do I need to do? And sometimes stuff just happens. You know, I had a crazy morning. I accidentally got into Aaron's StreamYard and streamed my morning video from his instead of mine
On his channel?
onto my channel, thankfully.
Oh,
Thankfully. But
that is hilarious.
I know, I couldn't believe it. I was like, I start my live stream and his intro plays. I'm like, what's happening? And then Nancy, my moderator, is saying, I don't see you. I can't get into StreamYard. And I'm like, oh no, I'm in the wrong one. But you know what? This morning,
Oh.
I was really tired. I was even debating, like, am I going to do this? I'm like, yeah, you're going to do it. You know, so I can kind of go back to like, I can
It's
back.
a time change.
Yeah, it's the daylight savings time.
Yeah.
It totally messes us up. I totally blame that.
Yes, totally. Well, now I feel better because at least this is my StreamYard that I'm streaming from.
Exactly. You're already ahead of me for the day.
But so like just the last point that she kind of makes is sort of that it's like sort of when we are dwelling on something, it's like we're like, why did this happen? Why was it us? Why? And it's not, there's no reason sometimes. That's just the way the world is, and trying to figure it out endlessly
Mhm.
can be harmful. It's like bad things do happen. And she also does briefly say how this incident that she had on September 11th, it made her appreciate her life. It gave her this moment where she thought that she was going to die,
Mhm.
and she realized how precious life is.
Mhm.
And I actually feel like this is going to sound horrible, but one of the benefits of having been in Scientology was when I left was how much I value my freedom and how much I appreciate
Mhm.
like that I could get up a little later today,
Mhm.
that I have a car, that I have money in my bank account, that I can talk to you today. And I think that it gives me a little bit more gratitude. And if I'm going to look at the negative things, then I can also look at some of the positive things. And even just having like spent half my life there, which, sucks, but it has put a fire under my ass to be like, that's right. And I'm going to live the rest of my life to the fullest.
Yes.
So I'm going to travel as much as possible. I'm going to, me and Natalie are going to go on a trip together.
Yes, we
And
are.
yes, we're going to live life to the fullest. And it sort of has helped me to realize what is important in life.
Yeah, it really does. There's something magical about gratitude. You know, when
Mhm.
we can find what we appreciate, number one, we're going to get more of that. And secondly, it does something magical in our brains where we're suddenly like, oh, okay, this just really isn't so bad. And I've done that. That's been the secret sauce for getting me through dealing with losing Tony is I never felt that, like, well, why or why us or this isn't fair. because I leaned so heavily into, I am so thankful that we
Mm.
had the time we did.
Yeah,
I'm
you're
so
so good at that.
but it forced me to. It's almost like it was that or die. I mean, it
Mhm.
just like, and I, through the tools that I learned, I kept just hearing, it's like, gratitude is such a key tool. And at first I was like, that sounds like trickery. Like,
Yeah, like toxic positivity, yeah.
yeah.
Mhm.
But I started leading into it and I was like, "Oh my gosh, it actually works." And then I started remembering more. When I think of Tony, I was always seeing him sick in the hospital, sick in the hospital. When
Mm.
I started leaning into the gratitude of the time that we had together, the life lessons that I learned with him,
Mhm.
um, I started realizing, like, I felt so fortunate, the love that I got to experience. It'd be selfish of me to be like, well, I should have gotten. Well, no, I got 11 years. A lot of people don't ever experience the
It's true.
love that I had with him. And when
Mhm.
I lean into that, it also has helped me remember those fun times, all the years that he wasn't sick, which I
Mhm.
realized I had kind of not been thinking about. And so now when I'm going through his things, and it's still at times, of course, it's sad, but I'm also leaning into like, oh, I remember where the stain on this shirt came from. I remember that
Mhm.
day. That was so much fun. That was when we painted the bathroom.
Mhm.
Those things. So there
That's
is,
cool.
yeah, it sounds cheesy and like trickery, but gratitude. And I feel that way too about even when I look at my time in Scientology. I don't
Mhm.
look back on it with a ton of regret or I wish that, because for all I know, I'd be a totally different person today. And I'm pretty happy with myself today. So if I'm
Mm,
happy
mhm.
with myself, I know I'm more self-aware. I know the things are that I need to work on. I know the
Mhm.
things that make me crazy about myself. I know what makes other people crazy. It's like
Mhm.
there's a comfort in that. Like, okay.
Yeah, someone said recently, who I had, it was somebody who I did like a short interview with about my life a little bit, and they were like, you've lived 2 lifetimes
Yeah.
worth of things, and that's tough, but it's also the amount of things that you learn from it, the amount of people who you meet, the amount of places you are, the amount of things that you learn from it. Like there is a positive in things. Now there's things that I missed out on learning that, lots of never-ends want to teach me and be like, "Oh, you never heard of this." And there's also a lot of things that I know that they will never know.
Mhm.
And so it's like I have I feel like come to a point where initially what all I did was take away. Well, initially I saw it as all bad, and then I was only trying to take away the positive, and now it's sort of leveling out where it's like if I'm going to take the negative, I'm going to also try to take the positive. And that feels just more healthy to me because it almost sometimes feels like if you see the positive, then you're pretending like the negative didn't exist. And that's not true.
Yeah.
It's not true. The negative still did happen, and it doesn't negate it in any way.
Yeah.
But
It also
both
doesn't
things.
mean that it has to negatively affect us today. We're not saying it didn't happen.
That's right, yes. Yeah, and when I was talking to Tim Fletcher, I was in the last episode I did with him, I asked him, I was like, "What makes trauma trauma?" And he essentially said, "It's not what happens to you necessarily, it's what you do with it."
Mm.
It's like if you say this happened to me and then you create this coping mechanism in your mind where you're always going to act this certain way and it ruins your life. So it's the trauma is what it does to you in your mind. And so something can be hurting you in your mind for years and years, but if you learn how to refile it in a
Yes.
way that serves you, then it's no longer really trauma
Mhm.
anymore.
Exactly. And Nick, you were saying, right, when you lean into the things that upset you and those
Mhm.
get stirred up,
Mhm.
that's where our energy is going. And if our energy is always focused on what's wrong, we're not actually going to create what we want. It's finding that balance. It's like, I love eating, but I have to brush my teeth. You know? You have to floss. You're gonna
Yeah.
eat, you gotta brush your teeth and floss, especially if you're having sugar. It's kinda like that. It doesn't have to be, these things start to lose their power, I think, as we really start to process them and we can share them as something that happened. It
Right.
happened, but it doesn't mean it has to have this power over us today if we choose to lean more into, what it is that we actually want and focus on those things and lean a bit more into the gratitude of it all. It's crazy how actually simple it is, but man, do we complicate the heck out of it. And Jenna
Mhm.
too, our brains were wired to think like how you're describing it. We were kept in a state of fight or flight, so we never reached beyond the walls of Scientology or in the Sea Org. All
Mhm.
we took everything we had just to focus on what we were doing, and we were
Mhm.
led to believe the whole planet would end if we didn't do whatever our job was.
Exactly.
We
Yes,
don't have
that
to
is so
do
true.
that anymore. We can take the time. Like, I'm trying to do more. Until recently, honestly, until Tony died, I would work until I would collapse, and then I would
Same,
take a break. But
same.
yeah, but since then, I'm like, "Okay, I'm not gonna do that anymore because it just doesn't serve me." And it never occurred to me that I had a different option because that's how I was in, just that I still had that Sea Org mentality when it came to work. And that's very validating when you work with people who appreciate that you have a good work ethic and you get things done.
Mhm.
But if we don't advocate for ourselves and take the time when we need it, like I'm trying to, if I have like 20 minutes, I'm like, okay, well, maybe I'm going to go outside, or maybe I'm just going to
Mhm.
do something I want to do instead of
Right.
continuing to keep going with work. Give myself the space to
Yeah.
actually think and contemplate. And that's why I like doing puzzles. That's why I like
Mm.
sitting and
Yeah.
watching the trees, because that's
Yeah.
the only time that I'm never not doing something.
That makes sense. Yeah. You said something a minute ago where you talked about like how you would always sort of work yourself to the bone and never ever stop. And I had a period in my life where I like would do the same. Like I would work every day of the week. I had my own business. I would carry heavy things all the time. I just was like totally like a Sea Org member, which if you don't know, that's Scientology's most dedicated group where they work 115-hour weeks, and they just never stop working. And and then I experienced this burnout, and the burnout was traumatizing.
Yeah.
But from that trauma, I have now, like, that's bad. That was not fun. But I have now taken away that, yeah, now I need to know my limits, and
Yeah.
I need to listen to my body's feelings and how I feel.
Mhm.
And from that trauma, I am going to get something good out of it. I'm going to learn how to get the things I want in a way that doesn't hurt my body or myself.
Mhm.
And so while it was trauma, it's like using certain tools. I can take those things and build it into an experience that I'm now grateful for. I'm actually grateful that I had that burnout because I couldn't have gone on like that for the rest of my life. So it almost is a way, like, you start to see how certain things like the universe is a little bit conspiring to help you even when something seems horrible,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
Um,
I
so
agree with that completely, and that's I think where we find some level of balance. It's not always balance all the time. It's kind of like, wow, I need a little bit more me time to bring a little more even keeled here, or okay, I'm feeling like I'm slacking. I need to do a little more over here. And,
mhm,
and we walk that. But I think the trauma that I've experienced, and even of recent, is
mhm,
exactly what you're saying. It's actually, I'm finding that if I take that energy and I just learn everything I can from it, now
mhm.
there's something more meaningful that can be done with it than just being stuck in it. That,
Yes,
just like even
absolutely.
growing up in Scientology and a lifetime in a human trafficking cult will mess you up in a lot of ways. And but as you work through it, it's like we start recognizing how absurd so much of it is.
I like
And
how we're laughing about a lifetime in a human trafficking cult, but only we're allowed to. If there was someone else having this conversation and they laughed at you, then it would be inappropriate, but we're
it
allowed
would
to
be. It would be, but we recognize that it's so absurd. That
Mhm.
was our normal. We didn't see it, and now we're on the outside going, "Oh my gosh." Like, yeah,
Mhm.
and it's that rejection that I think brings on the laughter because it's so ridiculous today. Like, there's
Mhm.
no scenario today where you're getting me back into that environment, and
Right.
there's no scenario today where I'm handing over the reins of my life and my decisions and my autonomy
And
to
your
anybody.
family.
Yeah,
Yeah.
anybody, and that includes people on the internet with strong opinions. Like, thank you for that feedback, and I decide, do I wanna think with it, take it in, or do I feel like if it's BS, then I'm gonna ignore it and keep going. I'm not gonna give it another thought,
Yeah.
and it's because I've been through very difficult things, and
Mhm.
because I appreciate the freedom that I have today, just like you, I
Mhm.
don't want to waste time on that. I want to have fun. I wanna
Yeah.
enjoy, and we do need to I wanna do like, what I love being abo on YouTube is I love doing the content that I do. It makes me happy. It
Mhm.
brings me joy.
Mhm.
So, that's perfect. When work doesn't feel like work, then, I mean, that's kinda living the dream, and I know how much it bothers Scientology, which is such a bonus.
It's true, that's the best part.
Yeah.
Okay, Nat, well, you're the best. Thank you for being such a good sport and coming into this with me totally blind. Next time, it's gonna be something crazy that's gonna make you, like, so uncomfortable.
Challenge accepted.
Okay, well, I love you, you look cute, and,
Love you too, beautiful.
okay, bye.
Bye.
Okay, thanks everyone for listening, and I will see you again soon. Bye.